to another episode of the Tampa Bay. Oh, I need this, don't I? Welcome to another episode of the Tampa Bay Real Producers Podcast. This, of course, is the podcast that is made for real producers, by real producers, and with none other than Tampa Bay's real producers. We are also powered by Top Producers Nation. And today we have the Broker of the Year, according to the Agent Choice Awards nominees and voters from last year's banquet. None other than Mr. Frank Albert in the house. How you doing, Frank?
Hey, I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no doubt, man. It's good to have you here. I feel like we should have had you on the show a long time ago, but you've been a staple, I think, of our platform for a while. If you don't recognize Frank, then you probably didn't pay much attention to the December 2023 issue with Frank on the cover in his beautiful red suit, looking bold. We've also had Frank actually featured all the way back. I was looking at it. I think it was our first... It was our first issue ever with Tony Baroni, I think, spotlighted on the cover. Frank was in that issue as well as a rising star at the time. And he's really continued to grow his brand. And we'll dive into all that with Frank here on the podcast. So it's great to have you here, man.
Thank you.
Let's start a little bit for people who don't know your story, just about like, did you grow up here? If not, how'd you get to Tampa Bay? And eventually, how'd you get interested in real estate?
Yeah. So I was born in New Jersey, raised in South Florida. Coconut Creek area. Lived there basically my whole life. Went to UCF in Orlando and then landed in Tampa I got a job at the Hard Rock Hotel and Casino.
Yep.
So that kind of brought me here.
You already had a passion for numbers before you started doing the casino gig, right?
Yeah, a little bit. Not as much for the casino stuff, but I was a poker dealer, so.
Yep.
Yeah.
Blackjack too, or just poker?
Just poker.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm sure you learned a lot about just like reading people and watching
Poker
the group.
face,
Yeah.
Negotiations. Yeah, a little bit.
Did you play too?
Yeah, for sure. You kind of have to play when you're dealing a little bit, just because you're around it so much.
Right. How long did you do that?
Let's see, 2000, probably like 8 years, roughly.
Okay.
Started in 2008. That's when I moved to Tampa.
Yep. And then how did the bug for real estate get you?
So when I moved up here in 2008, the prices of real estate was probably half the price of South Florida.
Mm-hmm.
So that kind of piqued my interest a lot. That's kind of what made me want to stay here. So I bought a property, and I had a good job at the Hard Rock, so I was making pretty good money. So the goal was just to save up and keep buying investment properties. This was also coincidentally at the bottom of the market, 2009, 10-ish. So I started, trying to buy a property a year, because back then you could buy a house in Newport Richey for $50,000.
Right. Remember those?
Every time I saved up $10,000, I would buy another property.
Mm-hmm.
I had a buddy of mine that we were partnering on, and it was just kind of hard to get realtors to respond to $50,000 properties.
Sure.
So I just decided to get my license just to make it a little bit easier and kind of learn a little bit more, since we were going to be buying so many.
Yep.
So I did that, and then while working,
these were
in the
just
casino,
like rentals, right? Short, long-term rentals.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The first one was to live in, and then after that was just long-term rentals. The mortgage was like $300 a month, and then we would rent them out for like $800, $900 a month.
It's a good little business.
Yeah. And then a lot of people at the Hard Rock at work started wanting to buy, because rates were so low and prices were so low, and they were all making pretty good money. That was kind of the one thing that was a little recession-proof, was the casino industry.
Mm.
People
always people
found
that
money.
are addicted to gambling, right?
Yeah, they always found money to gamble with. So the money was still good there. So everybody was kind of buying houses, and kind of built up a name within the casino, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
And then
the real estate guy.
Yeah, it's the real estate guy.
Mm-hmm.
And then after probably a year or two of doing both, I said, you know what, maybe I should jump into this a little bit more full time, just to, learn a little bit more and be more of an expert. So I did that. And then I would say I kind of consistently kept cutting back my hours more and more at the Hard Rock for probably much longer than I should have. It probably lasted like 3 or 4 years of just being 2 days a week. It was pretty flexible work schedule, which was great.
Were you bringing in like private money through some of these people you were meeting, and then continuing to buy properties, but like setting it up for other investors, or the ones you were buying were for your own portfolio?
Yeah, only me and my buddy at the time. Okay. We were buying properties together. Mm-hmm. And then all the other stuff was just retail sales, helping people find homes to live in.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. So little bit of a different start than some of the other people that we've interviewed, on this show, which is cool, which is why I love, being able to do this. Is you hear so many different ways, that people get into real estate and why they get into real estate and how that's grown, for them over the years. So you were selling just as an investor, building your portfolio, and then also doing some of your own individual, helping with residential retail. And then eventually you had this concept of wanting to kind of establish your own brokerage and then grow a team, right? Was that always from the beginning, or did that happen
It started kind of over time, I would say. I was getting pretty busy, and I was at the point where I was about ready to bring on a buyer's agent and start a team.
Mm-hmm.
And one of my best friends at the time, she was also looking to get into something new. So I told her she should come in and we could kind of partner up. She could join the team.
Mm-hmm.
And just kind of did that organically. And at the same time, a good buddy of mine also wanted to join the team. So both of them came on board. I kind of did training for both of them at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I got lucky with them because they were both like so fantastic of agents.
Are they still with you?
Yeah, they're both still with me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is that Courtney?
No, Kaylee and Marino.
Okay. I don't know if I've met them. Maybe.
Yeah.
They'll probably come to some events over time.
Right.
Yeah.
So I trained both of them. They were both fantastic. I was also much slower at the time, like compared to what I have on my plate now. So I think I had a lot more time to sit down and train and help, teach from scratch.
Yep.
And they both, turned out to be fantastic agents.
And that's when Frank Albert Realty started.
No, we were the Frank Albert A team at the time.
Okay.
And then shortly after that, maybe a year or two after that, actually, I brought on Chandler. And then another person wanted to join, a good buddy of mine. And coincidentally, at the time, I was kind of starting to do a little bit of commercial real estate. So we focused a lot in the Seminole Heights neighborhood. So I was helping a friend of mine lease out this big commercial building that had multiple units in it. And it was kind of like the hub of Seminole Heights because it had all three really good, like some of the best Seminole Heights restaurants right there in that building. And then I helped lease out the fourth one, which was going to be Mecanita, which was, I knew before they even opened, I knew that it was going to be a huge staple of the community.
Yep.
And then it left this one office space in the middle, which I just thought would make the perfect real estate office. Even to that day, I didn't really want to be a broker necessarily.
Mm-hmm.
I was happy with the team setup, but I just didn't want to mess with the remote office of my former brokerage. And, Seminole Heights is it's a small, tight-knit community. So I felt like a bigger name brand wouldn't do as well, like having that name on that, on the sign, basically. So I just kind of decided to switch it to a brokerage and jump in.
And why not just name it after yourself?
Yeah. And I signed the lease before I even had my broker's license. I just signed it and started renovating it. And I just knew, okay, I have to get my broker's license by the time this is ready to open.
Now, were you still buying like single family homes and trying to build up the portfolio as far as long-term rentals during this whole process?
So simultaneous to all that whole story, basically, my buddy and I sold the ones that we did have, and I wanted to kind of pivot to multifamily.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to sell the single family house that we were living in and buy a house with a guest house or a duplex or a triplex or something along those lines, because I really, at the time, the goal was to get out of the casino completely and have like a little bit more financial peace of mind before I was just 100% commission based.
Mm-hmm.
So the goal was to essentially eliminate my mortgage/rent payment. Mm-hmm. So the goal would
live in one side, rent out the other.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
So that kind of switched. So we sold off those properties, kind of went solo individually. I found my first house that had a guest house in the back. So I did that, bought that, and then that was kind of the goal, was to eliminate my mortgage payment, which that allowed me to do.
Mm-hmm.
And then it just allowed me to save up a lot more money faster to be able to buy multifamily, which at that point was the only goal.
Cool. I don't think we talked about that before.
Doors.
So how many units did you get up to on the multifamily space?
27-ish, somewhere around there.
How many buildings did that represent?
Probably 7.
Okay. So like triplexes, some quads.
Yeah.
What was your biggest building? Do you remember?
I
you have
never went above the residential, so it was all
It was all quads or less.
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah. And that's cool. So do you still have those?
Mm-hmm. I've sold a couple and bought a couple different ones and swapped out and kind of rode the wave of certain ones. And I kind of like to mathematically see which properties are making the most amount of money, and I keep those. Mm-hmm. And then even if they're great ones, as I build up a lot of equity, if a certain one kind of goes up in value higher than the rest, then I like to cash out on those and kind of redeploy those assets.
Were any of them new construction, or were they all existing properties?
No, all of them were existing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you intentionally not get into like the commercial space of 5 units or larger for a reason?
Yeah, at the time I didn't have
the money,
any funds whatsoever. So
Okay.
it was like buying whatever I could FHA, living there for a little bit, and then, kind of working my way up from there.
Makes sense.
Saving up the cash.
Because generally with those 5-unit buildings or larger, you need to have more down.
Correct. Yeah.
Right. That makes a lot of sense.
And even back then with conventional, you had to put like 20 or 25% down for the multifamilies.
Yeah.
But I was trying to find more like owner financing deals that would allow me to put a little bit less down, things like that.
Yeah. So how did you balance, or even to this day, Frank, talk to us about your balance of, because you're still an investor at heart, at least I view you that way based on our conversations that we've had. I remember one of the conversations we had up at the Center Club one time for lunch. It was great for me to hear how you look at a short term. We haven't even talked about your STRs yet and how you've approached that, but the math behind it, how you break it down, it made a lot of sense to me. And it was, I got an appreciation for your thought process in that. And yet you still, have a successful retail brokerage, you would call it, right?
Yeah.
Residential retail. So there's that in and of itself is a full-time career, plus building and still trying to find, good investment property and opportunities. Right. That's a whole other thing. Yeah. So there's a lot there, right? To have to try to unpack and figure out what you're going to invest your time into without one of those suffering.
Right.
Right. So how does that work for you today? And like when you think about it, how do you approach that mentality of how much time is invested in the investment world and building the portfolio versus recruiting, supporting your team, and focusing on the residential real estate?
Right. Well, I don't necessarily recruit. I'm not like a big brokerage, and I kind of grow the brokerage organically.
Intentionally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do it just like, when I'm doing deals with people, like we're all a pretty tight knit group from the very beginning. It was, it was my best friend and one of my really good buddies who was a client of mine. It was never random, complete strangers that just like called up and wanted to join, or that I just called up and said, hey, you should join the brokerage for a cold call. It was always somebody that either a friend of mine that I tried to get into real estate, or somebody that I did a deal with that we just got along really great. And I thought they were a lot of fun, and I thought they were really professional, and I saw great potential in them. Other than that, it was never like going out and recruiting or doing events to try to get people to want to join the brokerage. It's kind of never been that. And even from day one, I just never wanted to be that kind of brokerage. Yeah. I wanted to always kind of keep it small.
How many agents do you have now?
30.
It's not really small, Frank.
Yeah. Well, I like awesome. A lot of people we get along.
And it has grown organically to 30.
Yeah.
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 And so that, again, just speaks to a healthy culture, because I'm assuming those 30 I'm imagining that's not all your personal network. That's the agents you've brought in who have then invited their personal networks, and that's how it's grown. Is that correct?
Yeah, like obviously I allow my agents to, I encourage them to start their own teams and to recruit whoever they want. So like I don't put limits and restrictions on that.
Right.
I just kind of put a restriction, on myself. Like if somebody calls up and they want to join,
totally.
It's not that simple. I actually just a couple weeks ago just made a post for the first time ever that we were looking to recruit one specific person, because I had a job task that I needed somebody to completely focus on, an agent to do. And that was the first time ever. And I kind of wanted somebody that I didn't know for that position, just because I had to be a little bit more strict with the tasks. I mean, everybody's subcontractors, so they can kind of do what they want, but I wanted to kind of put a little bit of guidance on where they should focus their business on, while continuing to do the business that they were already doing.
Right.
But the goal of that job was to kind of help our builder partnerships that we have, just trying to find more land and tear downs and things like that.
Okay. So would you say more of your personal time is focused on the investment side of things?
No, definitely not.
It's on the brokerage.
It's definitely on the
support.
brokerage. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so do you have anybody on your team who is consistently focused on the portfolio building part of it?
The portfolio,
meaning
for
your
myself?
personal portfolio?
No. So at this point, I'm not really buying anymore. I mean, I say that, but I say that all the time, and then I find a property that I fall in love with. But I've done pretty good. I haven't bought anything in quite a while. So now it's just kind of on autopilot a little bit. It's just self-sustaining.
Do you still have the long-term rentals?
I have one long-term rental that my tenant's been with me she was there for 3 years prior to me purchasing that building. And then she's been there ever since, basically.
Okay. Did you convert the other ones to the STR strategy?
Yeah. As each tenant left, I kind of converted each one just to kind of see how that location would do, see how it would perform, and then I would kind of expand as the tenants would leave.
So let's talk about that a little bit more. So at some point you started really focusing your investment strategy side anyway on this short-term rental focus, right? Yeah. Talk a little bit about why that became, an interest for you. And what are you up to, like 20 something now? I think I remember from our last combo.
Yeah, I think 25-ish.
25 STR units. Okay.
Yeah.
So why was that something that became a focus area for you? And what have you learned about it? What do you love about it? What do you hate about it? How's that worked?
So I want to say it started for some reason the year 2015 stands out. I'm terrible at timelines, but I feel like it was 2015. It was my single family house that I lived in, the very first one with the guest house. I had a great tenant in there. She had a lease on the property. And then while that was going on, I bought 2 triplexes. But when her lease ran out, her and I kind of became pretty good friends. She was considering renewing it, and I want to say she was paying like $800 or $900 a month in rent at the time. And I basically said, hey, for like, at the time back in 2015 when rates were 3% or whatever, I said we could find you like an entire house for maybe $200 or $300 more a month, something like that. So, every time I as a realtor, obviously I'm very pro ownership. So I don't know if that makes me a good landlord or not, but every time a tenant's lease is up,
you're moving them out into a home.
Yeah, I would say, why don't you just buy instead of renting?
Yeah. It's a great lead pool, though.
Yeah, it was a good lead pool. And then it was good for them. They were happy. I think they really respected that I wasn't just trying to milk rent out of them for a decade and like actually wanted them to succeed. And especially the people that ended up buying 10 years ago, 9 years ago now, I think are really grateful that they did, because a lot of those people could never afford to buy a home now.
Absolutely.
With the rates being double, triple what they were.
Sitting on some equity at this point.
Oh, for sure.
Tremendous amount. Yeah. So
that's cool.
So I did
they
that.
Have you to thank for, Frank.
Well, yeah. But so that one, timing wise, it was kind of when Airbnb was really starting to gain a little bit of traction, not what it is now, but it was starting to become a little bit more popular. And I just kind of thought maybe this would be a good kind of practice to do. It'll be easier for me to manage because it's right next door to me. If something goes wrong, I'm right here. And if it doesn't work, then I just rent it back out to a long-term tenant.
Right.
So I did that. I spent like a month or 2 decorating it, furnishing it, getting it ready to go. And then I want to say like the day that the first one was ready to go, one of the hurricanes came. I can't remember which one. And a tree slammed into the roof and destroyed like half the stuff that was in there.
Oh, that sucks.
It was not a good first start.
Yeah. Is that a sign or what?
Yeah. Well, I persevered. I pushed through it. I made it work. And then I think it held me up like 2 or 3 months. I had to redo everything, get it back up and running. And then it took off. And then I just kind of worked my way.
Was that on Airbnb?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. And
has that been the main platform that you've used for all of your STRs, or do you also utilize others?
It was the first that I used.
Yeah.
And then as I started getting more and more into it and had more units in it, I didn't like that I had such monopoly, like that Airbnb had such monopoly over my business. And I would read in a lot of the Facebook groups, a lot of people that Airbnb would just go in and just deactivate people's accounts and wouldn't give them a reason why. Or sometimes they would get a reason and it would be something ridiculous. Like a guest would see like a Wi-Fi box with the Wi-Fi and take a picture of it and tell Airbnb that it was like a camera spying on them or something.
Mm-hmm.
And then Airbnb would just go in and deactivate their account and wouldn't give them any argument to justify it or anything. And I would hear about lawsuits. And so basically I said, I don't want Airbnb to have that much of a power hold over my, short-term rental business. Sure. So I expanded.
So what did you expand to?
So I use a platform called Guesty.
Okay.
And they kind of pull in your Airbnb listings essentially, and then they feed it out to essentially all of the big ones now. They consistently add new channels that you can feed it out to.
Oh, that's cool. Booking.com, Vrbo, all that.
Yep.
Yeah.
Expedia.
Including Airbnb.
Correct.
Does that Guesty platform also have like a built-in concierge where it communicates on your behalf for helping people check in and go through all the onboarding steps?
Yeah, it's an extra service that you pay for, but it's basically it's a team of people that kind of manage your inbox and reply back. And then I'm like 50-50 on if I'm going to continue doing that, just because when there's an issue, like sometimes they're really good at responding to it, but a lot of times that they'll just respond and then they'll reach out to me and let me know the issue. So it's kind of defeating the purpose.
Sure.
Instead of
Aren't you supposed to handle it?
Yeah. So instead of me telling them what to tell the guest, I could just be telling the guest and solving it.
Right.
So I'm kind of undergoing what the new kind of pivot's going to be for that. Gotcha.
Is there a reason why I guess I would imagine the reason is just maybe changes in interest rates and you're not seeing, deals. You're not as excited about deals today as you might have been, before, but is that what has slowed you down with wanting to continue growing that, or is there any other reason?
No, not necessarily. I just think like when you reach 25 to 30, it's
harder to manage,
full on business.
Right.
Yeah. And it can be, like every single one.
You're running basically a small hotel.
Yeah, essentially.
Spread out.
But spread out across the city.
Right. Right.
So it's not that easy. The biggest thing that's been helpful to me has been honestly the cleaning company that I started. Mm-hmm. A buddy of mine, his mom actually was, when I was much, much smaller scale, like less than 10, she was kind of running all the cleaning and everything for me, her and a friend. And then my buddy and I, who's also an agent at the brokerage, we just kind of sat down with her and we kind of talked to her and asked her what she thought about starting a business and branching out and her helping train people and kind of growing it, because I knew that it was such an integral part of my company, that I knew that as Airbnb was blowing up, that everybody else would need something like that. Because like the one thing that was amazing about his mom was that if she was sick, if she didn't feel good, if she had a vacation, no matter what it was, she was there and would get it done or would ensure that somebody did. And a lot of other Airbnb hosts and people that I would speak to, they were constantly like, my cleaner called out. I can't find a cleaner.
You need that reliability.
Or they have to go, scrub the floors at 10 o'clock in the morning before their guest checks in.
Not fun.
Yeah. So
interesting. You started the cleaning business out of a need because of your STR portfolio.
Yeah.
Does that cleaning business still really just serve your current SDRs, or do you market that as a cleaning service for anybody now?
Correct. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and that was kind of the goal, was that to get it to not just mine. That way we could hire multiple cleaners. That way Airbnb hosts could not just be relying on just one cleaner. They would have a whole team of people, 10, 15, 20 cleaners that would basically be able to go and clean the property and know exactly how that unit is supposed to look every single time, regardless of who the cleaner is, regardless of where the unit is, to basically just come up with a system. And we have an app for that we use that shows each cleaner where all the, where all the extra toilet paper is, where all the stuff is. And then they can also go in and take pictures if there's any damages when they're there. That way it makes the Airbnb host kind of streamlines their business a little bit. It makes it to where they almost don't need an Airbnb manager. We kind of take off like 60 or 70% of the work. Makes it a little bit easier for them to just kind of handle it themselves.
How many cleaners do you have?
We have, I want to say around 14 right now.
Are they employees or?
They're subcontractors.
They're all subs, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So
what's the name of the cleaning company again?
Clean for Travels.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then, if you don't know, Frank also owns Sublime Staging as another one of his entrepreneurship ventures. And so what was the genesis of starting that company?
So I want to say that also started in 2015.
Is that also tied to the STRs, like staging the property for STRs? Or no?
No, it kind of started a little differently. That was a little bit more of when I was starting the real estate team, I think. I forget the exact timeline of how that all played out, but I know that personally, just as a realtor going out there and showing houses, I would see a major difference in buyers appreciating the home staging.
Yep.
And it wasn't very common at the time. There was only a couple stagers back then, maybe two that I like, big ones that I knew of. And I just would get listings and I was like, okay, we definitely need to stage this place. And I would call up the staging companies and they were either booked out 3 weeks and couldn't get to me in time, or they would do it and then they just the customer service was lacking dramatically. I was getting complaints multiple times about the customer service side of things. And then the biggest thing that made me think, okay, I should start a business out of this was when I had this one guy who wasn't completely sold on staging. And she said, well, just tell him he could pay half and then he could pay the other half after, if that helps convince him. And I said, okay. So I did it and that worked. And that got me to be able to convince him to do it. He saw it. He loved it. We sold the house. He paid her the second half and it worked out great. And then maybe 3 or 4 weeks later, I had another listing and I called up the same stager and I was like, hey, I got another client. I told him about the same deal that you offered last time. They're ready to go. And she's like, oh no, I can't do that again. And I'm like, well, I already kind of pitched it. Can you just do it this one more time and then I won't pitch it again? And she's like, no, I can't do it. So that's when I said, okay, let me just pay for it because I know it's going to help me as a realtor sell the house a little bit quicker.
Yeah.
So I did that. And then from there, I was like, man, it just makes no sense why, like if you're staging this many houses and you have this good of a business, why can't you float $2 or $3 grand for 2 months until this place sells? So I just kind of thought that seems like a good niche because like I have a need for it. That's kind of how all my
So is that the model you kind of approach now? Generally what you do with Sublime is float a little bit of it.
We offer it. Yeah, we offer it now. But that was the reason that started the company.
Yeah.
Since then, we've gotten stiffed a couple times from people that just refuse to pay at the end, and you know it kind of happens. It's the cost of doing business, I guess. But yeah, so that's kind of what started the company, and then it's just grown from there.
Interesting. So, any other businesses that I don't know about?
I think that's it.
Of the ones you have, just to recap. So, Frank, I don't know what you would call your investment portfolio, but that is a business, right, in and of itself. Then you have, of course, Frank Albert Realty, which is your brokerage. Clean for Travels is the cleaning company. Sublime Staging is the staging company. Is your heart in one of those? I don't know if you want to ever say that. It's like you love them all, I'm sure. But do you have one where you feel like that you're really passionate about for a specific reason?
I mean, my heart's in all of them, definitely. The biggest one I think is definitely the brokerage, just because of the people relationship that I have with clients and my agents specifically. But in my head, I have like 4 different personalities that are constantly doing different tasks between each of the 4 businesses. The least amount of that one little personality is the cleaning company, because I have a fantastic partner. My buddy Chris, who's one of my agents, he's the majority partner on that. I'm just a minority, and specifically I didn't want to be a 50-50 partner because I already had way too much going on. I wanted to just kind of help come up with the idea, brainstorm, help market, bring in units, kind of just do that. And I wanted him to kind of take it and run with it, and he's done a great job. Cool. So that one requires definitely the least amount of my time.
You're the sole owner for the staging?
Yeah. So well, I just basically gave one of my employees a minority partnership as a reward for being a great worker.
Cool. The people that you work with in these other businesses, have the pool of that talent come through the real estate side? Is that where you met those connections to start those businesses with, or no? Or that you've staffed them through, or no?
Not the cleaning company. Well, the cleaning company, obviously I started with my buddy Chris, who was through real estate. Coincidentally, with the staging, one of my agents also he's just like one of the best human beings. He's 6 foot something, huge guy. He can bear hug a couch and lift it up and stage an entire house on his own.
Perfect partner.
Yeah. So he has become the perfect partner. I couldn't do it without him. And, I started the staging company by myself. And then after a couple years, I brought on a partner.
Mm-hmm.
I brought on an employee that I kind of made a silent partner essentially, with terms of, over time making it official.
Mm-hmm.
During that time, it did not work out.
Yeah.
There was a lot of stuff found out that kind of essentially like crippled the business essentially.
Yeah.
So I kind of thank Monte, who's my partner within the real estate side or who's my partner in the staging side of things. Because honestly, I couldn't have picked the business back up from what it was in when it was left that way.
Mm-hmm.
He just helped. I would have probably just walked away from it with how it was, how it was left.
Decimated. Yeah.
Yeah. So
I know we talked about that briefly before.
Yeah.
Have you always considered yourself an entrepreneur?
Yeah, definitely.
So even when you were just working at the poker tables, you knew this was the path, huh?
Yeah. Well, even as let's see, I got suspended from school from selling candy and emptying out my backpack and stuffing bags of chips in my backpack and selling them. My mom would take me to Costco to buy them in bulk, and then I would bring them to school and I would sell them for $1. I was buying them for
You're one of those
30
kids.
cents. Yeah.
It's funny. You always hear that story or something similar, right? When you're talking or interviewing entrepreneurs or you hear them on podcasts and stuff, it's always some buying and selling element when they were a school child that they got it from, right?
Yep. Always. Yeah. And then from there, I started like a flyer delivery business for local businesses. I would go door knock local businesses, and I think I was maybe 12 or 13, something like that.
Yeah.
And then would go to Office Depot and print out the flyers and then hand them out outside of Publix or stick them on people's doors.
Yep.
For companies. Yeah. So I think I've always had
What do you think are some of the biggest challenges that you've experienced as an entrepreneur with multiple revenue streams, right? Multiple lines of income. I think I'm a believer that there's immense value in having multiple revenue streams, right? Because obvious reasons, if one is struggling, you have that support somewhere else. And there is research that talks about the average millionaire out there has 7 streams of income, and all of that is true. But then there's also the reality that there are many people who try to do that, and then their timing is off, or they don't structure it properly. And so that it's the whole shiny penny syndrome, right? Where like wheels just keep spinning. They don't do any one thing very well, and they never get good enough traction. They try to do too many things too fast, and things fall apart, and they just get frustrated, right? Yeah. That's a common experience. And I've even felt that, to be honest, in certain ventures that I've allowed myself to kind of allow my focus to be diverted into, right? So what do you feel like has been a key for you, Frank, to avoid that, right? To actually run a successful business and then be able to do it, or, maybe scale it to the right level and then bring your focus into something else without allowing that shiny penny syndrome to be a downfall for you?
I would say 100% great people.
Yeah.
Just leveraging other fantastic people that are hard workers, that kind of see the vision, that share similar mindsets and have the same goals. There's no way I could do any of it without each and every single one of the people on the brokerage side of things, on the staging side of things, the cleaning side of things, everything. You have to be able to let go a little bit and just trust that the people that you're partnering with and working with are just going to be able to kind of take it and run with it and not micromanage too much. Just kind of set the expectation of the goals and what the vision is, and just kind of let them run it.
So what does that org structure look like for you? Is it similar in each business, or is it very different?
As far as like hours?
Your people. So like when you look at each business, do you have like an operator? The way I think about it is that you need to have, every business needs an operator, right? Somebody who's going to be, the buck stops with me as the operator of making sure that the operations are done successfully and executed. That many times is not the entrepreneur, right? Not the CEO necessarily. But without that person, nothing gets done. It's just all thinking and vision and no actual execution, right? So does each one of your businesses have that person, an operator in place that's your kind of, because I view you as the visionary, right? And I could be wrong. I think you've obviously operated probably in every seat at times, but I don't really view you as the operator. of any of those businesses, but please correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, I am. Yeah.
You are the operator.
Well, not the cleaning company. Chris definitely takes that and runs with it. And to an extent with the staging, a lot of the client communications and scheduling and things like that, I'm still definitely the operator. But as far as in the field, it's definitely my recent partner, but longtime employee now.
Yep.
He's like, I'm more of the behind the scenes guy, and he's more in the field actually getting the stuff done.
Okay.
So,
and then for the cleaning or for the staging company, for your brokerage, you would consider yourself the main operator?
Yeah. Well, staging is me and him, I would say. And then for the brokerage, definitely me. Yeah.
You. Okay. So other than that, from an org chart standpoint, do you have other roles that are delegated with specific, like a layout plan of who you're hiring and for what reasons? Like, what do you think are some of those key positions that have been needed for you?
Not really. I've kind of been in charge of hiring with pretty much everything except for the cleaning company, I would say. And like I said, I'm really picky with who I'll bring on for the real estate side of things. So I've never wanted to outsource that to someone who's going to broker and recruit, because that's not our brokerage.
Sure.
That's not our model. So I kind of always want to be the go-to for that.
So the 30 agents on your team, you're their go-to guy.
Yeah.
They go to you for whatever, questions, support, training.
I don't always answer right away, but yeah.
Sure. But you're the main guy that they go to.
Yeah.
There's not like another team leader or somebody who's responsible to manage that team.
No.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's crazy how much time that must take, right? Just to invest.
Not trying to reach me right now.
They can wait a few minutes.
Yeah.
Hopefully they're learning something by listening to the interview, right?
Listening right now.
Yeah, exactly. They're hopefully watching live as we speak.
Yeah.
So I didn't really recognize that, but that's cool. So you are the operator of the brokerage, but on the staging side, you have this partner who, correct me if I'm wrong again, he might be the one communicating directly with people selling the home, arranging the staging.
No, I do that.
You do that as well?
Yeah, I do. For now, I do, because this whole partnership, disarray of everything kind of happened about 2 years ago.
Yeah.
So it's fairly new.
You don't want to release the reins on that yet.
Yeah, especially after the way that it happened last time. So I definitely want to keep my hands on the wheel for that a little bit longer. Eventually I will kind of bring on somebody to take care of that role. I actually am in the process of finally hiring an assistant, which is embarrassing to say that I've gone all this time without one. I did briefly have one for about a year. But yeah, since it just takes so much time to train and hire and to find the right person, that I've been kind of holding off on, forcing myself to do that.
Sure.
But I've been.
By the way, I don't know if it's helpful now since it sounds like you have one, but there's a platform out there called greatassistant.com, which I'm familiar with, and I know some people that have used it and really rave about the results. So it might be worth checking out.
Interesting.
It's just different. They do things a little bit differently, is my understanding, as to how they set you up with a great assistant. So,
right. And it's like a full-time position, or you get like a
they
temporary.
prefer you to work with full-time assistants, but I think you can select part-time, but they prefer to put you up for a 40-hour week full-time executive assistant.
Yeah, I want to hire someone that's going to stay for a decade or more, and not just come for a year or two.
That's their intent. I know. I've checked it out a little bit myself. I have been kind of gun shy about pulling the trigger on it myself, but I have a couple of VAs that do a lot of the roles of an assistant. But I can see the value in that person.
Yeah,
for sure.
And it's going to have to be somebody who can kind of well verse themselves in all aspects of all different companies and kind of help. Just because I'm pulled in a million different directions,
exactly,
they're going to have to do kind of the same thing.
Yeah, and you get to interview whoever you want, so you can kind of make that decision based on who you're talking to as to whether you think they're capable of that or not.
Yeah.
But I think that's the point, is they lay out first in an interview with you what you really need and what you want, and then they find that candidate for you.
Yeah. Oh, that sounds really good.
Yeah. Might be worth checking out.
Yeah.
Cool, man. So with all this stuff going on the business side, must be hard for you to just have some fun time, huh? Some downtime, personal time for people who want to get to know you a little bit more. What do you love to do for fun?
I work for fun.
It sounds like it. You travel a lot though, man. I know you were with your team, but you guys just did a great trip to, was it Greece?
Yeah, we went to Greece last year.
Yeah.
We're going to Italy this year.
That's cool.
So that's kind of how I force myself to have some fun, is that we take a team trip every year, all expense paid.
That's awesome.
For everybody who hits the sales goal for that year.
Mm-hmm.
So that's like kind of my way of not only forcing myself to have fun every year, but
Right.
also forcing my team to kind of get away from work and
Yep.
and focus on having a good time. And
These aren't like
sightseeing.
local trips to like, Honeymoon Island or something. Like this is like
No, yeah.
exotic.
Yeah.
I don't know what the budget was on that trip to Greece, but I'm sure it
a lot,
wasn't.
yeah.
I'm sure it wasn't cheap.
Yeah.
So that
Italy's
sounds like an
gonna
awesome
be-
trip.
Italy's going to be even more. But I mean, I think the most basic one that we've did was the Keys, and we did the cruise that they do from Fort Myers down, like
Yeah.
the day cruise.
Yeah.
And then we were down in the Keys for, I don't remember, 4 or 5 days, something like that. And I'm trying to remember why we just did the Keys. I want to say it was like during COVID-ish to where we couldn't travel outside of the country or do something a little bit bigger.
Right.
Yeah,
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Probably was.
Yeah, nothing local.
It was tough to travel to Europe during that time frame.
Yeah,
They were locking down on everything, right?
yeah. And like my big goal has always been Japan.
Mm.
So next year is going to be Japan.
Nice.
So
Can I join the team just for like a week?
Yeah. Just got to sell enough volume.
What was the quota to hit it last year?
Last year was 5 million.
Okay.
Which actually, since the brokerage has kind of been started, the goal was always like you have to do at least 5 million to join.
Yeah.
And then you have to do 5 million that year in order to go on the team trip.
Okay.
Basically, so that everybody got to go on the trip. But obviously, stuff happens in life. Sometimes I'm not anyone's boss. I'm just the broker. So
Yeah.
sometimes people take 6 months off, a year off.
Totally.
They just want to lay back and kind of coast.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's not like I fire agents or anything like that.
Right.
As long as,
Sometimes they fire themselves, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, our agent retainment is like probably unusually high, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I've only had to get rid of like 1 or 2 agents ever. And I think the only agents that have ever left is to go start their own brokerage. And we're still really, really good friends. And I kind of help them give my advice as needed to
Yeah, it's
to
impressive.
start.
Even
But-
we were talking off camera, we have this elite agent mastermind that we put together this year, and there's some pretty big team builders in that group, Andrew Duncan, Joe LaCicero, Jeffrey Borum, and they were talking through in some of their presentations what their ratios are right now from recruiting to sticking with agents that are producing.
And I'm curious, what are they? I've never looked into
Well,
that.
you have to talk to them, man. It's not really my place. But I mean, it was
they
probably
high?
like 1 in 4 was pretty average.
1 in 4 stays?
Yep. 1 in 4 retains over the course of a year.
Wow.
That probably varies. I think what they're finding right now is maybe a little bit different than what they were finding a couple of years ago, but just based on where things are at.
Yeah.
So, and the fact that you haven't experienced that, again, speaks to some differences possibly in culture and other things that are going on over there.
Right. I'm sure if I was just hiring, anybody that we didn't have a good relationship
Right.
with, I'm
It
sure
would be
it would
similar.
probably be similar.
Yeah.
Maybe not. But yeah, I think just that that I take the time to be a little bit pickier with who I'm going to bring on board, I think makes a big difference.
Yeah, no, that does make a lot of sense for sure. But it's impressive to me that your team isn't small yet. Like you've taken that approach, right, to be able to still scale, which speaks to you have to have good retention if you're going to grow.
Right.
In
Well,
any
when
way.
I started, it was going to be 10 agents max. That was what I said. Was
Yeah.
10, and then that's it. And then those 10 could recruit and hire buyer's agents and grow their teams within the brokerage. And then that just kind of got
changed.
carried away. Yeah.
Yeah, I get it.
Over time, especially at the Hard Rock, just because, I really respect and love the job that I had there as far as the scheduling is concerned and the money. It allowed me basically 100% of my success I attribute to the flexibility that job gave me. But at the same time, I just absolutely hated the physical job of it.
Yeah.
And so as I was kind of getting out and as I got out,
What did you hate the most? The hours or just being there at that time or?
No, the hours didn't bother me because I was always I still am a night owl. So that didn't bother me, but really just the people, honestly, the guests, like not all of them, but the vast majority of them were people that were not in a good mood. They were losing money.
Yeah.
They were throwing cards at you, throwing money at you, cursing at you, complaining about you. It's just,
And
sucks.
you can't say anything back, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, you can, but you got to be careful how you do it.
Sure.
Otherwise you won't be there very long.
Sure.
But yeah, I mean, that just just being forced to sit there while people are just like complaining about you. Like
Yeah,
you
it's gotta be
dealt
tough.
me another bad hand. It just kind of
Yeah.
eats away at your soul over 8 years.
Yeah, I don't think I'd have the patience for that. I would snap pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. No, I've thought about going back to just as like, just to put some people in their place.
Yeah, I can imagine. That would be funny. It'd be like that Boiler. What's that movie, Boiler Room, where you just take your watch off and throw it on the table.
Oh, I didn't see
You know
that.
what I'm talking about? Oh,
No.
you gotta check that out sometime.
Okay, I'll watch it. Boiler Room.
Yeah,
Alright.
or it's not his watch. I think he throws his BMW keys or something around the table because he wanted to send a message to the people that were there as to like who he is now in this moment.
When he's playing poker.
No, it wasn't
Oh,
poker
okay.
at all. It was a business movie, but
Okay.
it was the concept of being able to show them who you are now at this point.
Right. Well, no, I wouldn't do that, but I would just like talk. I would, like you said, I would probably talk back
Yes.
much more than I would have if, like, when I was, desperately in need of that job.
Yeah. No,
Just
it
to kind
makes
of teach
sense.
some people, like, hey, you're talking to another human. Don't you got to treat people with respect.
Totally.
And
They forget that when they're losing money at the poker table, I would
yeah,
imagine.
for sure.
All right, let's put a bow on a couple quick things. So, we talked a little bit already about, some of the trips that you guys take from a personal side of things. And it doesn't sound like there's a ton that you're able to do outside of business from a standpoint of having fun. But do you have a favorite book or author or seminar even that you've attended that you feel like has made a big impact on you personally or professionally?
I would say I have two, which I know that on past podcasts of yours, I know that one of them recently someone mentioned, so I kind of feel kind of corny saying the same one, but The Secret is a big one for me.
Okay.
And then I think that the Keller Williams Real Estate Millionaire or Millionaire Real Estate Agent, I think is a fantastic
That might be the
book.
most popular one actually that's come up, Rob.
Oh,
don't you
really?
think? Yeah, there's been a lot. I mean, I think for good reason. The
Yeah.
book is kind of a training manual, for any agent to go from zero to $1 million agent.
Yeah, and
Just
I read
follow it.
that while I was taking my first real estate class 14 years ago or 13 years ago. I don't know
Yep.
when I got my license, but
Yep. Yeah, no doubt. Do you have a favorite TV show or movie?
too many. Way too many. Of all time TV
Sure.
shows? Probably Dexter, Lost. No like cool business one.
You're into
or
the
anything
adventure
like
ones,
that.
huh?
Yeah, I like adventure and a little bit of sci-fi. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. Favorite food?
Again, too many. I'm a foodie.
You're in Tampa, so there's plenty of
that's
options
another
here.
that's another business actually that I forgot.
You have a restaurant?
Not a restaurant, but a food blog that's kind of morphing into a business
Is
very
that right?
quickly.
You
Yeah.
monetized it already?
It's to the point where when we go, we don't pay for food anymore.
That's cool.
I try to at some places.
You just like review restaurants?
Yeah, we do videos and stuff. It's Travel Tampa on Instagram.
Okay.
And yeah, so we've gotten a lot of invites to places like for grand openings or just places that want to feature.
Yeah.
But
never ends, Frank. Never ends.
Yeah, that's kind of like, I guess that's my hobby. That one, it's morphed into a business, but that started as just as a hobby page.
Yeah.
If I had to pick like two foods, I'd say probably pasta and seafood or sushi.
And I know that you have a lot, or I don't know if a lot's the right word, but you do parties at your house fairly regularly, right? That I've seen people invited to, whether that's just close friends or people from the brokerage or whatever. So it seems like you like that entertainment lifestyle.
Yeah, I forgot about that. I do some stuff for fun, I guess.
Yeah, that counts.
Yeah.
I think that contributes.
Yeah.
All right, man. So we'll end with this. I wish we had more time because I feel like we didn't get a chance to talk as much about your brokerage as I would like, but we'll have to have you on the show again sometime. There's just too many things to talk about with you.
Yeah.
There's too many businesses that we can dive into. But thinking about what type of legacy you might want to leave, which I always find this question fascinating to get you to think about what you'd want to be most remembered for. When that time comes and you're sitting on your rocking chair and you can think back and look back, what do you think would matter most to you as far as what you'd want to be most remembered for?
Yeah, so 100% I know the answer to that already, and it was actually something that I touched base on in the cover article that I did with you guys. Was the way that whole team trip kind of started was my great uncle was, I want to say 97 or 8. He was very old, but he was like sharp as a tack. and he was in the hospital for something, and I went to visit him, and I was just hanging out with him for a couple hours talking. And I remember I had a trip coming up of some kind, and he was like, "Oh yeah, I've been wherever," and he was telling me all the places that he was, and I was like, "Man, I had no idea you traveled so much." And then he was telling me, he was in the military in World War II, and that's how he did a lot of traveling, but the majority of it was after being in the military. He worked for this company, and his boss would essentially take the whole team all over the world. So I kind of stole the idea from my uncle's previous boss, and this was, I don't know, 60 years ago or so, and he's still sitting there 60 years later telling me the story about how his former boss took him to Europe and took him to all these places, and how he said, short of the military, he would have never gotten away and gotten to see all these cool places.
Yeah.
And like, you could tell that he was like still lighting up 60 something years later about all these places that he got to visit because of his old boss. And like, instantly I was like, man, I should start doing that. That's amazing. I want 60 years from now, I want people to remember that trip that I took them on. And like, I hope that everybody travels, before or after working with me.
Sure.
I think everybody needs to travel.
Yep.
But I think that that's like something that I hope that people remember, is like the trips and the time, and not just the work, but the actual things that we do for fun.
Yeah.
And
no, I'm a big experience guy myself, so I think it's awesome what you're doing. For many years, I think I told you this, I used to work with Cutco. That was my business prior to getting started with Real Producers, and that's what they do too. They have an annual trip. They do multiple, but they have this one big annual trip where they take all of their top producers to exotic places all over the world. And I had a pleasure of going to Prague, and that's when I went to Italy, and places like England, and cruises, and Hawaii, and all these different places. And it was all in my 20s, during that time frame. And those are the things I actually missed the most, more than anything work related.
Right.
When I was doing those years with Cutco, was the traveling and the trips and what that exposes you to. And I think there's something really magical about just being able to be in a different culture, spending that time, and the memories that's created from that. You just never forget it. So I applaud you for doing that for your organization, because I think it's probably impacts in a way that you won't even necessarily recognize right away. But as years go by and you continue the relationships you've already developed, and even if people end up leaving your organization, they're never going to forget that. So it's pretty powerful. It's really cool stuff.
Thanks.
So we'll have to do something with we have a brand that you've heard me maybe mention called Top Producers Nation that we're getting launched here, which will be tied into Real Producers. And maybe we'll have to figure out some traveling kicks to be able to pull that off.
I was going to say, you could probably figure out some way of incorporating some travel in.
Yeah, without a doubt. We'd have to talk more about that. I can pick your brain on that. That would be a lot of fun.
Sublime could sponsor a trip.
Hey, let's talk it through. I'm down. Let's end our episode the way we always do, with a challenge. There was a lot that Frank and I had a chance to dive into in this particular conversation, and you just got a chance to hear from somebody who really is an entrepreneur, right? And we don't always have entrepreneurs on this show. In many ways, depending on how you define an entrepreneur, I guess we do, based on the fact that we have successful agents on the show all the time. But Frank, I would say, is a unique entrepreneur in the way that he's been successful in multiple businesses, including, of course, real estate. And hopefully you got some nuggets into his mindset today as we went through the interview. So is there one thing that you can take from this conversation that's going to propel you forward? Maybe you're somebody who's been debating or even struggling with starting up another business, or thinking about another stream of income, or wanting to invest in short-term rentals, or wanting to figure out a way to even support your brokerage at a different level. Maybe you love Frank's trip idea, right? And think that's something you might want to incorporate into your own life, or your business, or your team, or whatever it might be. Take an action step. Maybe it's something like you just want to pick Frank's brain on something and have a call with Frank so you can learn a little bit more. And if somebody wants to reach out to you, what's the best way for them to do that?
I'd say definitely frankalbertrealty.com would be the main one for anything real estate related. Sublimestaging.com for anything staging related. And then any Airbnb related questions, you could probably call me through the Frank Albert Realty line.
Very cool. We'll have that up on our description and stuff as well. But commit to taking an action step today, so that way the time that you invested in this podcast will be worth it. because without that, you're going to forget the majority of everything that you were inspired to consider when we were having our conversation here today. If you don't already subscribe to our podcast, just click that button. That way you're notified every time a new episode comes out, so you can see what the next ones will be. You can follow us, of course, on all of our platforms, TampaBayRealProducers.com, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube channel, and of course, coming is our launch of Top Producers Nation, where we interview and provide consulting and content for top producers all over the United States. So we will see you later, and have a great day. Check you later. Bye.
Hi, I'm Mary Lobdell, co-owner of A Radiant Property Inspection. We have been in the Tampa Bay St. Pete area for 10 years now, and I will tell you that the last 4 years have been absolutely amazing as partners with Tampa Bay Real Producers. We have such relationships thanks to Don Hill and the whole team here, and I would encourage anyone who wants to be a part of a good organization to come join Tampa Bay Real Producers.